His 13-year-old daughter,
Come on,
Sarah, was buried just a week ago.
Just from hearing other people talk and stuff, there was people that I suspected, you know, it was really hard for me not to go and grab them and throw them up against the wall or something. And
a 13-year-old girl became impatient waiting for her dad to pick her up after school. So she decided to walk home. She would never be seen again. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Sarah Ann Rairdon. Viewer discretion is advised. You know, it never ceases to amaze me. Most of you know I pick the cases I cover in these videos at random off of my gigantic list of about 4,500 names or so, which were all primarily given to me by you guys. And the fact that I pick these cases randomly and that I so often cover cases about children, it blows my mind that there are that many cases on my list about kids that I can pick at random and still get these so often. That's very depressing. And yeah, this is about a 13-year-old child. So today's story takes us to Underwood, Minnesota. 13-year-old Sarah Ann Rairdon was born on February 12th, 1972. She was born to John and Linda Fox Rairdon, and this was in Todd County, Minnesota, and then they would eventually move to Underwood. I think they moved away for a brief amount of time, but at some point in that little time frame, John and Linda had gotten divorced, and John quickly remarried. His new wife was Marilyn Rowe Berry. And kind of with both marriages that John had, there were a total of 11 children. So Sarah had 10 siblings. Their names were Michelle, Julie, Susan, Christy, Jesse, Jeffrey, John Jr., Mark, Adam, and Matthew. Yeesh. Christmas time must have been very expensive for good old Santa Claus in that family. Sarah was your typical 13-year-old small town girl. She was actually pretty popular in school. She had a lot of friends. She was described as a very happy, very bubbly, and very outspoken young girl. She certainly was not shy. Sarah got really good grades throughout school, and she was very active in school activities. She was on, I guess, the speech team. She was on the basketball team. She ran track and field. And this was just for her 7th grade year, which she would be attending Underwood School. From what I can tell, her home life was pretty different than her school life, where she was like, I mean, she was always described as like a really happy, kid at home and at school, but her experiences were very different. Especially with so many people living under the same roof, it's very difficult to really get proper attention. But she was really close with her dad, John. They had a really close and strong relationship. And apparently this didn't really sit well with John's second wife, Marilyn. She didn't like the relationship they had. I guess there was possibly some sort of jealousy. So she would treat Sarah like garbage. She would torment her and just sort of, verbally kind of accost her and abuse her around the house. It was evident that Marilyn had some kind of resentment, animosity towards this young girl because of her relationship with her dad. So she made Sarah's life a living hell. Apparently, Sarah also had a stepbrother who was Marilyn's son. His name was Jeff. And apparently he and Sarah also did not get along, and he would kind of go along with Marilyn and sort of making her life a living hell. But from the outside looking into this family, no one really noticed anything super unusual. It did, I mean, it was a big family, but it seemed very relatively normal. Nothing scandalous or anything like that ever came, from the household, and they just seemed like kind of like a really big, happy, but sometimes dysfunctional family like we all are. But in 1985, that perception of, relative normalcy would be shattered. It was May 20th, 1985, just your normal day, nice, bright, sunny, warm afternoon. Sarah went to school that morning. It was a typical school day. It was actually the last week of their 7th grade year. And this particular day, Sarah was going to stay after school with her friend Joe because the two of them were working on a project that was due by the end of the week. And this was a project in their home economics class. So they stayed just a little bit later, and then they went to, like a local little store kind of near the school. And there they purchased some balloons because apparently them with their friends and their class were going to do some sort of end of the year water balloon fight. So they were really excited about that. Sarah's friend Joe said, Sarah seemed really happy that day. She was really excited for the school year to be over, really excited for the summer break. And she absolutely did not appear to be in any kind of bad shape or, emotionally upset or anything. At about 5:30 p.m., Sarah's friend Joe would call her sister, Joe's sister, from the store they were at to have her pick her up. And so just a few minutes later, Joe's sister got there to pick her up, and they apparently offered Sarah, hey, we'll give you a ride home. But Sarah said no because she'd already called her dad, John, to pick her up, and that he allegedly was on the way to get her. Now, witnesses would say they saw Sarah by the store on her own, and appeared she was waiting. And then it appeared that after some time, she probably got impatient because her dad was a no-show. He hadn't come to get her yet. So she decided to walk home on her own. And so the last time someone physically saw Sarah near the store was just about 6 p.m. when she walked away. So she would have walked down, County Road 122, also along Whiskey Road, which would have been about roughly a 4-mile walk from the store to where she lived. It's kind of a long walk for a 13-year-old girl, especially. It's a little risky, because it's late in the evening, it's a long walk, it's starting to get dark. But kind of like I mentioned in my previous video from a couple days ago, the 80s were a much different time. People weren't as paranoid as we are nowadays. 7 p.m. comes and goes. Sarah hasn't arrived home yet. Sarah's dad, John, gets back to their house around 7:30 p.m. He says he had just clocked out about a half an hour earlier. Why he hadn't picked up Sarah, I don't think he actually mentioned why. But yeah, it's kind of strange because he said he was going to pick her up, but then he didn't. But apparently it was actually normal because John would sometimes either work a split shift or he would just leave work and commonly to pick Sarah up from school or wherever she needed to be picked up from, bring her home, and then go back to work. But where the wires got crossed today, I'm not sure. 8 o'clock hits. Sarah still isn't home. Everyone's now beginning to panic. It's dark. Where is she? Molly wants to say hi real quick. She was whining, so you want to tell the story? Okay. So shortly after 8 p.m., the two people that seemed to give Sarah the most problems, Marilyn and Jeff, they get into their car and they begin driving around town and where she was last seen to see if they can find her. John, meanwhile, stays back at home in case Sarah comes back into the house. And also he wanted to call all of the friends, of Sarah's to see if maybe they knew where she was. All of her friends said the last time they really saw her was earlier that afternoon at school. Joe said she had last seen her around, 5:30 p.m. near the store, confirmed by Joe's sister. So that's the last time anyone really ever saw her. Hours more go by, their searching comes up with nothing, so they finally call police. and they report Sarah missing. You're not really contributing much to the story at this point. Okay. Yes, you're a good girl. So, right after that happens, after they call police, report her missing, the search then becomes exhaustive. They become heavily involved. The police become heavily involved. They have 40 to 50 volunteers, and on top of the giant family, all out there searching for her. Then basically the entire community then made it their mission to all band together and find this girl. They searched every nook and cranny. They turned over every leaf, every rock to find this girl. But they were not having any luck. They would have daily news reports just kind of updating the community on the search for Sarah. Her father, John Rairdon, got on camera almost every time and, crying, just begging the public for help, begging for Sarah to be returned home if she went away on her own accord, begging for her to come home. Like I said, Sarah and John were really close, so this hit him especially hard. But the pleas for help still didn't come up with anything. Minnesota's Attorney General got involved, and John would work very, very closely with him. And then this little task force was basically put together, not only to help search for and find Sarah, but also to kind of be involved in other missing children that may have come up in that time frame. And John was very active on that task force. Police interviewed hundreds of people. They got a whole bunch of tips. Some people claim they saw some kind of beat up old green Chevy on the same road during the same time that Sarah would have been walking down it, but those tips led to nothing. They never found this vehicle. Police also interviewed every single member of Sarah's family, including and especially Marilyn and Jeff, the two people who did have known issues with Sarah. But they offered nothing substantial. And even though John was being extremely helpful and cooperative and he was very involved, they still had to grill him, John, with regards to, his missing daughter. They would determine that John had a confirmed alibi. They were able to show that he had clocked in and out of work. So they had his punch records to say that he was at work and he could not have done anything. They also found and recovered a notebook, I guess, at the school that she went to. It was Sarah's notebook, and apparently she had detailed that she may have been scared of someone, and she may have even feared for her life from someone. But by who? I didn't really say. They would also interview many of their neighbors and also Sarah's friends, and they got a better insight of the family dynamic. The police did learn that Sarah was, in fact, picked on and almost bullied and harassed by Marilyn and by her stepbrother, Jeff. I guess Sarah, at one point, it's reported that she called social services to report that she was being physically abused by her stepmom, Marilyn, but it didn't appear anything actually developed from that. So, did Marilyn do something to Sarah because Sarah told on her? Was, Marilyn trying to get her to, be quiet permanently because she ratted her out? Did Jeff react because, she tried to get his mom in trouble? Maybe. Is this why Sarah is now missing? Very possibly. The search carries on. They look high, they look low, they look everywhere. They look in open fields and farms. They look through bodies of water in the area. Nothing. But about 2 months after she goes missing, the search would come to an unfortunate end. In, I guess, the nearby town of Rothsay, Minnesota, on July 6th, 1985, a local farmer was kind of working on some fields where he noticed a particular patch by a ditch that was super overgrown by weeds, and he noticed a kind of a crazy smell. So he went over there and he found Sarah. It was the partially decomposed human remains of a young girl that would quickly be identified as belonging to that of Sarah Rairdon. The coroner would find like a small circular type puncture wound in her abdomen. So they determined that she had been stabbed by something, and that was likely her cause of death. And then she was just dumped. Now police have a homicide to investigate. So now we're in a whole different world.
His 13-year-old daughter Sarah was buried just a week ago. 38-year-old John Rairdon of Underwood could go back to his job and house on North Turtle Lake. He could feed the ducks and the chickens and try to forget. But the pain and the frustration of knowing someone snatched his little girl off a country road on the way home from school will not go away.
Just from hearing other people talk and stuff, there was people that I suspected, it was really hard for me not to go and grab them and throw them up against the wall or something and get rough with them to really find out some answers. But it's so dangerous to do something like that because you might, I'm not trained in that sort of thing, and I might end up doing in the wrong person, so you got to be really careful.
Marilyn and John Rairdon are not ready to rest, not yet. Not while Sarah's killer or killers are still at large. The Sarah Rairdon Committee meets at least weekly to map strategy in their new determination to fight kidnapping in their area and find Sarah's killer. Over Coke, coffee, and Kerr jars of juice, insurance agents, mechanics, and even a county sheriff's deputy decide to offer $6,000 for the arrest and conviction of the guilty parties. The Rairdons would like to try to get back to normal again. They have other children after all, and they have their place in the country. But it doesn't feel as safe as it once did, and it is a world without Sarah.
And it wouldn't take long for them to find out what happened. They bring in the, her other siblings, right? Kind of individually question them. And it's after they realized she had been deceased. This is when the siblings, when they really open up. And they tell police that Marilyn and Jeff were not Sarah's main enemies at home. Her main enemy was her own father, John. The abuse from him started when Sarah was about 7 years old. And about once, sometimes twice a month for the next 5 or 6 years, he would go into her room and he would sexually assault her, his own daughter. He did this repeatedly. He did this consistently. So detectives bring John in for questioning, and he pretty much openly admits the assaults. He tells them, I am guilty of that. Then he says, but I did not kill my daughter. I had nothing to do with her murder. But I am the monster who did those other things to her. But after some persistent questioning by police, John takes it to kind of a weird place. He's now saying he can't exactly remember what happened the afternoon of May 20th, 1985. He says that he knows that he went into work sometime that morning at his tire repair job. He knows that at some point he left, and then at some point he went back to work. But all the stuff in between, he says he suddenly has no memory of. He can't remember what he did. Okay, John. He actually tells police, well, I guess it's possible I could have killed her. But I just don't recall. I don't know if I did. He tries to say that he started to believe he killed his daughter based on police suggestions, which, to be fair, isn't exactly uncommon. I mean, I've covered stories where people have falsely confessed to things because of that reason. But this was a little different. They weren't grilling John for very long. They weren't like... This wasn't after like 36, 40 hours of interrogation. He basically initiates the thoughts of, well, I might have killed her. Like, it was his thing. He did that. He told them, well, maybe the guilt of the sexual abuse I put her through, maybe that somehow triggered some sort of like memory loss with me. And maybe I did something to her. I just don't remember. He says that as the investigation into her disappearance was continuing, before they found her body, he says that he thinks, well, could I have done something to her? Maybe. Like, before she's even found. So he slowly convinced himself that he killed his daughter and then just played the role of a caring and concerning father looking for his daughter. He told the detectives that in the months leading up to her now murder, Sarah had begun to reject him and refuse his advances, and she began trying to turn him away, fighting back, if you will. Sarah was starting to stand up for herself and tell him no. So what John speculates happened that particular day is that he left work at some point that late afternoon to pick her up from wherever she was. He says, well, then I probably just, I guess maybe I brought her somewhere, and maybe she said no to me again, and I got mad, and maybe I just killed her. You know, maybe he took a tool out of his toolbox and stabbed her or did something to her. You know, and if he stabbed her, he then just watched her or waited for her to die. He then would have, hypothetically, gone back to work with her body in his truck, and then fudged his work records, clocked in, out, that kind of thing to make it look like he had been at work, and then drove her back to some secluded area to dump her body, then went home and put on an Oscar-winning performance for a couple of months. I like how John has basically confessed, but in this weird, like, third-person perspective, out-of-body experience, hypothetical way. So not saying he definitely did it, he's just speculating on his own involvement. But in the end, this hypothetical, I don't think I did it, but maybe I did it confession, police would look further into his work records, and his work would confirm that, you know what, he was gone for a long period of time. He did fudge his work records. He did something nefarious that day. And he just played the role of this loving, caring father who just desperately wanted his daughter back. And he got so much, care and love from the community, so much help from this community of strangers, for the most part, looking for his daughter, for him. John Rairdon is just a sick man, all the way around. On August 14th, 1985, he was officially arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of his daughter, Sarah. He was also charged with first-degree intrafamilial sexual abuse, so abuse of his own daughter. But John Rairdon would plead not guilty because he says, well, that was just I just gave them a hypothetical. I didn't actually confess. I don't remember. I have no memory of what I did that day, so I'm not going to plead guilty to it. His trial would begin at the end of January of 1986. The prosecution would produce a couple of witnesses who said that they saw between the hours of 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. on that day, they saw a truck, a pickup truck. It was a Midland Co-op Farm tire repair service truck, John's work truck. They saw it near this rundown, abandoned white farmhouse on County Road 122, the same road that Sarah would have been walking on. It was confirmed by John's employment. John was, in fact, driving that truck that day. John would have had absolutely no reason, as a tire repair service person, to be in the middle of nowhere at some abandoned farmhouse where no one lived. They also had testimony from Marilyn Rairdon, his wife, that during a jail visit that she had with him, he said, quote, "I know I killed Sarah that day." Not I think, he said, "I know I killed her." They also had the testimony, of course, from the coroner, who said that the circular puncture wound in her abdomen was very consistent with a particular tool from a toolbox that was in John's truck. Other medical experts, psychiatrists, would also testify that John's very convenient memory loss, his sudden memory loss about one particular, just only gap of time on one particular day, was actually quite selective and also quite voluntary. This was not actual memory loss. They basically said he was lying. Their expertise said that after interviewing him many times and getting a really good glimpse into him, that he faked this sudden memory loss. Well, shocker. John's defense would go on to say, well, John had no memory of doing this, and his confession wasn't really a confession. It was really just what he thinks could have happened if he had done it. They also would bring up people who said that the circular wound in Sarah's abdomen that the prosecution said was a stab wound, well, that was just caused by decomposition, just normal decomposition. What? No. They also said, well, there was no signs of, like, internal organs being punctured. That's because most of them had decayed already. They also produced their own psychological witnesses that said that absolutely John was telling the truth about his memory loss. That's very possible to happen. And to be fair, it does actually happen where people can lose memory of just a certain chunk of time. But the point that the prosecution's witnesses were saying was that they fully believed that in John's case, he was faking it. But this defense team's people were saying, no, he wasn't faking it. It was real. But real or fake, okay, so what is he forgetting then, defense? So you're not acknowledging that he didn't do it, you're just saying his memory loss of doing it didn't happened. The defense was basically just really grasping at straws. I mean, they were really, they kind of had no chance because John had already fully admitted, and there was plenty of people to testify that John absolutely sexually assaulted Sarah repeatedly over the course of 5 or 6 years. People did, observe her rejecting him getting possibly angry. There was no turning back for him at this point. The trial, along with the eventual jury deliberations, lasted about 2.5 weeks or so, and the jury came back with guilty on all charges. So John was found guilty of first-degree murder plus the other charges, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. He was also given an additional about 12 years or so for the intrafamilial sexual assault charges, which he can serve in hell when he dies in prison. So he has that to look forward to. A few weeks or so after he was sentenced, Marilyn Rairdon, his now ex-wife, she was indicted for charges of knowingly allowing child abuse. But she really didn't serve much time for it. But John is still alive, and he is still rotting away in a prison cell. So there's that. And that is it for this particular case. True Crimeroonies. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, please give this old channel the big subscribe, a thumbs up, a like, if you will. Once I get to 100,000 subscribers, I'm getting a freaking tattoo, so let's help get me along to that path. I got a whole bunch more videos on here to watch, just single story cases, but I also have a whole bunch of compilation videos that I pulled over from my TikTok page. So you got plenty of stuff to watch to keep you busy. Please also follow my Twitter and my Facebook. Those are linked below in the description, in my link tree as well. If you have a case you would like me to cover, you can email me at makingatruecrimerer.com, also listed below. But please check my case list first in the link tree. Make sure the name you want me to cover isn't already on there. If it is, you don't need to email me. Again, I pick these cases at random. I will get to it eventually, but it's random. But if you don't see the name, then just email me the name, where it happened, when it happened. And that's basically all I need. And I'll add it to the list at some point eventually. Next, if you'd like to support me in any way, we do sell merch. We sell t-shirts and hoodies and wine glass and whatnot. I'm working with Adam, who makes my merch and ships it himself, to be throwing in a tote bag at some point very soon. It'll probably be just a little while before he can get to it, but it'll happen. We do ship internationally, by the way, so anywhere in the world you are, he will send it to you. All right. Lastly, if you have a Discord account and you want to join my Discord, it's also linked in the link tree below. Please be over the age of 18, otherwise you will be given the old boot. So, yeah. All right, well, that is it for this video, True Crimeroonies. Until the next case, I have a medical question. Is it normal to have a fourth nipple? I'm asking for a friend. Is it normal? Is this an appropriate thing to ask people? Is this an appropriate way to end a video? I don't. Just. It's like 4.5 nipple. I don't know if you could tell me or not. I mean, if your medical expertise, if you could